Michael Kusugak grew up in Repulse Bay, Northwest Territories, now Nunavut. During his childhood, his family traveled by dog sled, living a traditional Inuit lifestyle. He is the author of 12 children's books, including The Littlest Sled Dog, The Curse of the Shaman, T is for Territories, Northern Lights, The Soccer Trails, winner of the Ruth Schwartz Award, Hide and Seek, My Arctic 123, and Baseball Bats for Christmas. He was also a co-writer of A Promise is a Promise with Robert Munch. Michael lives in Manitoba and spends most summers in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut.
I am Michael Kusugak, and at home up north, people call me Alvarook, and I travel around, I tell stories in schools, libraries, bookstores. I have something like 16 or 17 books that have been published. And ever since I started writing for children, writing for everybody actually, 33 years ago, I had a book published, A Promise is a Promise. That was the very first book I had published. I started thinking about who are we? Who are the Inuit? Where did we come from? How did we get here? Why did we settle in one of the coldest places in the world and stay there? And I was thinking, I have read so much stuff about us Inuit, written by scholars, written by archaeologists, anthropologists, talking about where Inuit came from and how we got here into North America. And one of the theories that I read a long time ago is that we've been around here for 4,000 years. That was the first thing I read. And then the next thing I read, we have been here for 6,000 years. And then I read that Inuit came across the Bering Strait and ended up in North America, in Alaska. And we came from Siberia across the Bering Strait and into North America. But we didn't cross the Bering Strait by water, that we trekked across there. And we did that, according to what I read, during the last ice age. Because for some strange reason, there was no water on the Bering Strait. It was all dry land on Bering Strait during the last ice age. I don't know how that happened, but apparently that's what the archaeologists and historians think. So anyway, we ended up here, and I figured if we came here during the last ice age, then we must have been here at least 10,500 years ago, because that last ice age went away 10,500 years ago, and there was water back on Bering Strait. But the Bering Strait is only 52 miles wide, and there's an island in the middle. And for a long time, we Inuit have been traveling around in these things we call kayaks. We invented them, and we covered them with sealskin. And so we've had these things for a long, long time. And I don't think there was ever any problem of going across the Bering Strait, because it's only 52 miles wide and there's an island in the middle. And that was not the only vessel that we invented. We also invented something called an Umiak. And an Umiak is a huge open boat that is as long as 30 feet long. And it's an open boat, and we used to paddle it and sail it. And so, I figure, the Bering Strait was no problem at all, and we ended up here. And so when we ended up in North America, we settled all across the north, all the way from Alaska to Baffin Island. And then we continued on up to Greenland, and because there are Inuit spread out all across there. And when we first came, we might not have had very much knowledge about living here. But if we were the very first people, 10,500 years farther, longer than 10,500 years ago, then there couldn't have been anybody that we could ask, how do you live here? What do you eat? How do you dress? What do you live in? How do you travel? How do you hunt? All those questions. We had all those questions and nobody to ask, all those questions. So we had to figure it out from scratch. And that means that along the way, we invented so many things. We invented the kayak, we invented the igloo, we invented these boots. These are made of seal skins, and they are the boots. They're the work boots that we wear. And I used to wear these every day when I was a kid. And what's wonderful about them is that, they're completely made of seal skins. And these things are light, they're warm, and they are waterproof. So somewhere along the way, we invented waterproof boots. And along the way, we invented also something we call kudlik. And this kudlik is really small, just a small model that we bought from up north somewhere. But the real ones that we used were really big, about this big, so they were really, really heavy because they're made of soapstone. And you put seal oil in here in the depression and the wick all along the front, and you light it, and when you burn it looks like it's got little candles all along the front, and that is what heated our igloos, and that is what we cooked with. Since we moved across, probably even before we moved from Siberia or wherever we came from. And then we went so far as to invent toys. And this is a toy. It's made out of seal bone. It comes from a great big seal, what we call Umiak. And in English, they're called a bearded seal because, of course, they have a beard. And this has a little hole right there, and that's where the tendons used to go through. And what you have to do is you have to flip the bone up in the air and catch it in the little hole with the stick. So we play it like this. Anyway, it works. So we had igloos. We have the warmest clothing in the world. And we had lots of food because there are lots of seals, there are lots of caribou, there are lots of fish, and so we had lots to eat, and we had warm clothing, we had waterproof boots, we had kayaks and all kinds of things, and even toys. So after a while, we were very comfortable. And what happens when you're comfortable is that your people begin to multiply. So there got to be more and more and more Inuit. And today, Inuit are spread out all across the north. There are Inuit in Siberia, there are Inuit in Alaska, there are Inuit all across northern Canada, including northern Quebec and Labrador, and there are Inuit in Greenland. And we all speak the same language. And it has many different dialects, our language, Inuktitut. But we eat the same basic foods. We dress basically the same way. And our language has many different dialects. I have a hard time just translating back and forth from one language to another. Kayongnak. And you would say that if you were standing inside and you look outside and it looks really, really cold, you can feel the cold without going out there. You say kayongnak, it is like I can't bear to go out there because it looks so cold. Like, but not, not really. But it's something that, that is very hard to translate, like word for word in English. So we have lots of those kinds of things that are really hard to translate. So, and, what you eat, how you feel, how you dress, what you call things like pilok is caribou fur, like one little piece of fur, caribou fur, and kisik is seal skin, and there are all kinds of different ways of saying things. Like, for example, we skin a seal, right? We skin a seal, we skin caribou, we skin polar bears, we skin all kinds of animals, we skin birds. And when we talk about skinning animals, we have two different words for skinning, depending on whether they are sea mammals or land mammals. So for sea mammals, we use pilak, which means to cut. So when we skin a seal, we pilak it. But when we skin a caribou, we aktok it. And when we skin, Arctic hare, we aktok it, and just like we skin caribou. But polar bears are sea mammals. They're not land mammals in our culture. So we pilak a polar bear like we pilak seals. So there are those differences in the way we look at as we classify things. So after a while, we were comfortable, and when you have a lot of people in one area, one thing you need are rules. Rules about how to get along with each other, rules about how to take care of the young people so we can raise them to be respectable adults. We need rules about how to take care of the old people, because the old people have been around for a long time, and they have all this knowledge that you have to borrow before they pass away. You need rules about how to take care of the land, because the land sustains all the animals that clothe you, that feed you. And so we need all these rules. And a long, long time ago, somebody created those rules. And then they had to figure out a way to pass them on to the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation for 10,000, 20,000 years. And how did they do that? They did it through the stories. And these stories are really, really, really old. They're hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. The most famous person in our stories is a man called Kiviok. My grandmother said Kiviok was born a long, 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 long time ago, so long ago that he was the very first person on Earth. And I used to have this little joke with my grandmother. I would say, "Grandmother, if Kiviok was the first person, how come he had a mother?" And my grandmother would say, "Don't argue with old people." But my grandmother was very kind and gentle, and I wasn't very scared of her, so I would tease her, "Grandmother, he had a mother. How could he be the first person?" Well, old Inuit say Kiviok is still alive today, but he is so old, his body is turning to stone. And they say someday, when his heart turns completely to stone and stops, that will be the end of the universe. And there are many, many, many stories about this man. Well, in the very first story about Kiviok, there was a little boy. And this little boy loved to go out to play, but there were mean boys who lived in his camp. They would run after him, they would fight him, they would make him cry, they would rip up all his clothes, and the poor boy would go home to his grandmother because he was an orphan. He had no mother and no father, so he lived with his grandmother. And his poor old grandmother would take her needle and thread, and she would sew his clothes all back together again. And the little boy would put on his clothes. He would go off to play. The mean boys would run after him. They would fight him. They would make him cry. They would rip up all his clothes. And his poor old grandmother had to sew them all back together again. One day, when the little boy came home, there was a little seal that somebody had caught for them, and it was lying on the floor. His grandmother said, "I would like you to skin that seal." So the little boy took a knife. He started to skin the seal, and his grandmother said, be careful, don't put any holes in the skin." So very, very carefully the little boy skinned the seal. And when he was all finished, his grandmother said, "I would like you to take the sealskin and pull it over your head, and I would like you to put your head in that pail of water." There was a great big pail of water on the floor, so the little boy took the sealskin, he pulled it over his head so that it fit nicely, and he looked like a little seal. And then he took a deep breath, and he stuck his head into this pail of water. He kept his head underwater as long as he could, and when his lungs hurt, he lifted his head and he went, and his grandmother said, "Do it again." So he took another deep breath and he stuck his head back into this pail of water. And he kept putting his head back in the water, and an old man way up in a place called Kusugak told me he would keep his head underwater so long he would move the sun. Have you ever tried to hold your breath until the sun moves? It takes a long time, and finally his grandmother was satisfied that he could keep his head underwater long enough. And she said, "I would like you to go down to the beach. And when you're walking to the beach, make sure nobody sees you. And when you get to the water's edge, I would like you to take the sealskin and pull it over your head and jump into the water and go for a swim and come up right in front of all your mean friends who are playing on the beach." And sure enough, all the mean boys were playing on the beach. The little boy took the sealskin. He walked down to the beach. He made sure nobody saw him. And when he got to the water's edge, he took the sealskin, he pulled it over his head so that it fit nicely, and he looked like a little seal. And then he took a deep breath, and he jumped into the water. He went for a swim underwater, and he came up right in front of all the mean boys who were playing on the beach. And they looked at him, and they said, "Hey, there's a little seal." They thought he was a little seal, and they all ran up. They grabbed their kayaks, they put their kayaks in the water, they hopped in, they took their long paddles, and they started to paddle, following the little seal. And the little seal would go down underwater, and he would swim a little bit farther out, and then he would come up again. And then he would go down, and he would swim a little bit farther, and he would come up again. And the mean boys who fought him and made him cry and ripped all his clothes, they paddled their kayaks following along behind him. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day. And after a while, they were way out at sea. And when they were way out at sea, when the little seal came up, he would lift up his arm and his leg, and he would sing, "Anokiganaw, anokigakaili, unga, unga." And then he'd go down again. And he would swim a little bit farther out, and when he came up, he would lift up his arm and his leg, and he would sing, "Where is my wind? I want my wind." And he would make a crying sound like a little baby. Where? Where? People say the weather that was on the day you were born is your very own weather. And that is why, if you were born on a sunny day, usually the sun shines on your birthday. If you were born on a rainy day, usually it rains on your birthday. And this little boy was born on a very, very windy day. and he was calling the weather that was on the day he was born. The wind heard him, and it started to come. It got windier and windier and windier, and before long there were huge waves in the water. And every once in a while a giant wave would come and it would flip the kayaks over. And before long there was only one person left. That person was Kivio. Now Kivio ended up way over on the other side of the ocean in this strange place, and when he got there, he got homesick, so he started traveling, trying to find his way home. And while Kivio was trying to find his way home, he traveled through every part of the north, so there are stories about him everywhere. If you go to Siberia, you can hear stories about Kivio. If you go to Alaska, you can hear stories about Kivio. We have Kivio stories all across northern Canada, and there are Kivio stories in Greenland too. And those are the stories that I heard when I was a little boy.